Welcome to the party, pal. Your for the neighborhood Master Chaos, back with you once again for a very special deep dive, in-depth review of the the films of Shinya Tsukamoto. This is, of course, Solid Metal Nightmares, the Arrow video release. This is the non-limited edition. It doesn't come with a booklet, so I cannot offer my thoughts on the booklet, but does come with 8 feature films, and 2 short films. So we will be talking quite a bit about the films of Shinya Tsukamoto. I apologize, I'm trying my best here. For the next 4 episodes. I'm breaking it up into 4 episodes for this big, in-depth, deep dive. Because there's 4 discs, it's easier to just do it per disc. Let's go!
I'm so excited, and I just can't hide it.
Okay. Disc 1. Are you ready? I'm ready. This is where Tsukamoto really gets his infamy from. The most notably the first film here, but we'll talk about the impact of both films. What are the films I'm talking about? Well, it's a pair of sequels, kind of, not really sequels. Of course, it's TETSUO, the Iron Man, and TETSUO 2, Body Hammer. Now, I'm gonna break down the films, but I want to ask you a question real quick. Who's TETSUO? If you've seen the movie, who's TETSUO? There's no TETSUO in the movie. Well, apparently, I looked this up because I watched the movies. I ended up watching them twice with the audio commentaries, which I'll discuss later on. And it just struck me, wait a minute, there is no TETSUO. The main guy's name is not TETSUO. He's never actually given a name. According to IMDb, in the first movie, he's known as Man. In the second movie, completely different character, same actor, but he has a different name as well. Taniguchi, I believe his name is in part 2. So who the fuck is TETSUO? I looked it up. TETSUO means Iron Man, or something like that. Something similar to that in Japanese. So TETSUO, the Iron Man, is actually Iron Man, the Iron Man. Okay, got it. With that little bit of knowledge, let's talk about the first thing here, which isn't a movie, it's a short film. To begin this deep dive, we should really start at the beginning, and the box set luckily allows us to begin at the beginning with the adventures of Denchu Kozo. This is Shinya's second short film. The first one is not available because he used copyrighted music, and so it can't actually be shown anywhere. It was more of a test, really, but it was a prototype for TETSUO, as we hear about in the audio commentary and in the behind-the-scenes featurettes and stuff like that, the interviews. So, The Adventures of Denchu Kozo is a very strange film, as you would imagine. Heads up, this is going to get strange. If you were not aware, Japan is a strange place.
I have a bad case of diarrhea. I have a bad case of diarrhea.
Keep in mind, I am a big Japanophile, if that's the actual term. I love Japan. There's something about Japan that really speaks to me poetically, intrinsically in my soul, maybe. But anyone who loves Japan must be aware that Japan is kind of nuts. That's kind of a wonderful thing, but very, off-putting element when getting into Japanese cinema. With that out of the way, let's dig into Denchu Kozo, which is about a teenage boy with a power pole sticking out of his back that somehow has a time machine that allows him to travel 25 years in the future, only to discover that Tokyo has been taken over by cybernetic vampires. So yeah, that's 100% the plot, and it's shot in the very frenetic stop-motion style of Tetsuo, if you're familiar with that film at all. It's a 43-minute short film, and it was essentially as all of these were, a passion project. It was essentially a test to see if he could, do a longer form film and what that would look like. And at the time, he was a playwright and a play producer. He put on independent plays with a little troupe of theater actors that he had put together called the Kaiju Theater Group, I believe is the name that they went by. And he brought all his theater actors together and said, hey, let's make a movie. We made Denju Kozo as a play. Let's try to film it. And so Denju Kozo is here, immortalized in time for you to enjoy. It's very bizarre, but it feels like a full-on, fully fleshed out movie. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. It's got a satisfying character arc for the main character. It's surprisingly solid and well-made and well-structured for such a crazy damn story. I really liked it. I ended up watching it twice with the audio commentary, and Tom Mez is providing commentary for, I think, all of these films, so he's going to be our guide through most of these films, and I highly recommend it, especially because a lot of these movies are very strange, and it's hard to really piece out what's happening and really understand the plot. Tom will guide you through it and sort of point out things you maybe did not notice. So I highly recommend the commentary for all these movies, but namely for Denju Kozo, because you get a real background on Shinya and his filmmaking history and his theater history and what Denju Kozo really represented, which was a test. With the test, successfully placed, he won a big award that sort of put him on the map. For the most part, Denju Kozo was the introduction to the world of Shinya. So it's a very important piece of the puzzle when it comes to discussing his cinema. Wild little piece. Again, it sounds bizarre, but it's got energy and joy to spare, and I highly recommend you check that one out. And don't ignore it because it's not a feature and you think, it's just a supplemental. I think it's very essential to the box set and to the works of Shinya. But not as essential as Tetsuo the Iron Man, or as it's really referred to as Iron Man the Iron Man. Ooh boy, Experimental doesn't even begin to cover the steaming what the fuckery of Shinya's world. This rough, almost film school-like, dialogue-free, gay subtext of a film is quite an experience. It's very short, by the way. I believe there's different cuts. I believe this cut is 67 minutes. Yeah, an hour and 7-minute movie here that has bigger balls than almost any movie I've ever seen. The amount of time, the amount of energy, the amount of effort, the amount of love poured into this bizarre, sweaty, steel and steam mess of a film is unequaled, I think, by any other filmmaker. I can't even think, honestly, of another film that I thought really hit the ground running with such a unique and uncompromising vision as Tetsuo the Iron Man. This movie's nuts. This movie is off the wall. It is everything and unlike anything at the same time. I frequently think about movies that I want to show people. If I want to blow somebody's mind, what can I show them? Usually I'll show them something like God Monster of Indian Flats. If I want to make them laugh, I'll show them anything by Neil Breen. If I don't have anything currently that I think if I showed somebody this, well, Phantom Killer 5, I think if I wanted to blow somebody's mind, I could show them that. But this, I think, is more digestible than that movie in a way. I think if I showed them Tetsuo, this would blow people's minds wide open. You have never seen anything like Tetsuo. And it is a testament to Shinya's artistry, but also to his imagination that he's able to pull something like this off, which is not easy with almost no budget, doing most of the apparently doing all the stop motion on his own, which is time consuming and frustrating and tedious. The man delivers an explosive artistic package unlike any other filmmaker I know. And that is a triumph on its own. What is the movie, though? Does the movie make any sense? I'll be honest, the first time I watched it, I had a lot of questions. It's dialogue free, but I think it's clear enough that you can follow it. Essentially, we meet a salaryman who's unnamed in this. His name is Tetsuo, and he runs a guy over. The guy is some kind of metal fetishist. That's the name according to IMDb and other reviews I've seen. So here's where it gets unclear for me. I'm not sure if the metal fetishist dies or is left for dead. I think he's probably left for dead. He gets hit by the car, and it looks like the man and his girlfriend dumped the body in the woods, sort of leave him for dead. Looks like it appears as if the man has not died, because he comes back for revenge. He curses the man who ran him over and turns him into TETSUO by infecting him with metal, I guess. It's one of those things where you sort of just have to piece things together on your own. Now, there's also an interpretation that the guy did die. It's just his ghost has come and infected the metal or possessed the metal. But at the end of the movie, in the third act, the metal fetishist returns, played by Shinya Tsukamoto, by the way. Tomoro Taguchi plays the main guy, Tetsuo. He becomes a frequent collaborator with Shinya. The metal fetishist comes back at the end in the third act, alive and well, it seems, and even more possessed by metal and more intrinsically connected to this transhumanist biomechanical virus that's apparently spreading. I'm not sure what's going on. It's very unclear, but it's one of those movies where it's more about the feeling and the intensity and the heart of the matter than necessarily what is actually happening. Explain to me clearly what's happening. And I think that's sort of a detriment when it comes to part two. But we'll talk about part two in a minute. Here you sort of have to piece things together on your own, and you almost don't have any time to put the plot together because it moves so fast. I mean, you got an hour-long movie here, essentially, and it rockets through from crazy set piece to crazy set piece. He's having sex with his girlfriend, and he's feeding her eggs and sausages, and all of a sudden his dick turns into a giant metal drill, and he tries to drill her to death with it. Crazy sequence. Amazing sequence. Literally shot in one room, and it's one of the most inventive and jaw-dropping sequences I've seen in a while. I probably will ever see. This movie started the cyberpunk movement, by the way, in Japan. Was certainly the heart of that. We get stuff like Tokyo Gore Police, Meatball Machine. If you like those type of movies, Tetsuo is where it came from. The inspiration definitely came from my buddy Tets. I probably shouldn't say that. That sounds weird. Now, I gotta be honest, a lot of the practical stuff looks kind of shitty. But that sloppy approach almost adds to the realism of the moment. It's not a clean, polished world. It's definitely a junky mess of a world. The interpretation of the metal coming to life and the organic nature of it. It almost makes more sense that it's not clean cut, polished type steel, and it's more of a junkyard aesthetic, and that's honestly why this movie sort of stands out, because it's offering a junkyard approach to the superhero story. I mean, essentially, breaking it all down, Tetsuo is a superhero movie. Tetsuo meets a villain, the villain curses our hero in some way, and now he is developing superpowers. Think Spider-Man. At the end of the movie, we get a big superhero, supervillain showdown. The metal fetishist comes back, Shinya Tsukamoto looking insane, and they have to fight. They have to use their similar powers. They have to battle it out. Ultimately, it turns out to be a coming out party for the man, the Tetsuo character. It is a sort of a loose metaphor to awakening his inner homosexuality. I think it becomes apparent in a couple shots in the movie, but where they're sort of fighting each other with their dick drills. What the hell is even that? At least I think that's what happens. It's very much a mush of stuff at the end, and you almost don't even know what the hell is going on. And I think that was sort of the intent as well. I'm pretty sure it inspired the Michael Bay Transformers movies, because I had no idea what the fuck was going on in those movies. The intent of the villain, the metal fetishist, was to not only destroy, as revenge for getting hit by a car, not only destroy the man's humanity, but I think destroy his sexuality. And not only just turn him into a metal man, but turn him gay. I think that's my reading of it, the interpretation of it, makes it more interesting, honestly. It makes the reading of it, the interpretation of it, more interesting. What is the metal? Even the main character has a dream where he's getting, getting fudged up the butt by his girlfriend who's wearing this, like, hose-like strap-on thing. So there you go. I don't know what else. I don't know what else Shinya has to tell us when speaking towards at least the subtext of the movie. It 100% succeeds. But keep this in mind. I think with all these movies, Shinya is not necessarily making a movie for you or me. He's making a movie for himself. Filmmakers, unfortunately, have not as much control. Producers, actors, production crew, all this stuff, they all have their input. So you're not necessarily making a movie for yourself. Now here, Shinya is working pretty much on his own. He's got actors, but he is editor, cinematographer, stop motion animator. He does all that stuff. So he's 100% making a movie for himself. And I think all these movies in this box set are going to be for himself. Keep that in mind. He's not necessarily making a movie that's going to please an audience. He's making his wildest solid metal nightmares come true. And TETSUO is such a prime example of that. And I'm going to give this son of a bitch of a movie 5 stars. It is literally unbelievable, and you need to see it. TETSUO 2 Body Hammer is, right off the top, I'm going to say, it's not as good. It's not as good for many reasons that I shall elucidate. Namely, it's in color. The first one has a real rough, almost cracked out found footage feel to it. In a good way, in a very good way. It definitely speaks to the film, and it definitely lends the film a sense of gravitas that I think it needed. If it was shot in color, honestly, it would probably feel really cheeseball, which is kind of what you get here. Because it's shot in color, I think it already kind of removes itself from that experimental fever dream feel of the first movie. And it feels more like a traditional, generic kind of science fiction movie. On top of that, our narrative has shifted. Now we are sort of eschewing the obscure plotting, the less is more approach to storytelling, and we're literally given exposition throughout the movie. Which, to me, I think lessens the impact of the dreamlike aspect and makes it, again, just sort of a generic 90s movie. It just feels like a 90s movie. For better or worse, I think for worse, in my opinion. The film is not a sequel, by the way. This is not a direct sequel whatsoever. This is essentially a remake of Part 1 with the same actor, playing the supposed Iron Man, and a couple of the other returning cast members from his other works. And it's kind of more of a standard movie. I think that's the best way for me to describe it. It's not a bad movie, but it's definitely more of a run-of-the-mill movie. Despite all the crazy shit that happens in it, it's definitely not as impressive and not as rewarding, and I think it's because Shinya tried to shoehorn in mundane, modern-day stuff. And it's absolutely 100% to the detriment of the movie. Shinya's working with a bigger budget here, but this riot of chrome, wires, and cement just, frankly, exhausted me. And not because it was hyperactive like the first movie, but because it was quite the opposite. It was very restrained and slow-paced and offered gobs of exposition, which I was happy to get, but at the same time, it also felt like it sort of took away from what was unique about the storytelling in the first film, where you weren't necessarily sure what was happening, and it was sort of left to your interpretation, but the more you watched it, the more you kind of got what was going on. Here we're given very much for lack of a better example, this feels like the American remake of TETSUO. I think that's honestly the best way to put it, in sort of the clearest terms to you. That it feels like the American remake, and what do we know about American remakes? They're not always that good, and they always try to outdo the first one or the original, but they fail. They fail miserably sometimes. So what is the plot? Let's talk about that. It's very different from the first movie. Here we meet a man named Taniguchi who has become the target of a metal fetishist cult. Shinya Tsukamoto returns as the metal fetishist character, but he is not the same character. So, I didn't mention it here because I don't want to ruin anything, but if you know how the first one ends, the second one does not pay it off, which is such a bummer, and maybe why I don't like part 2 as much, because the first one has such a clear road to a sequel, and it did not deliver on that promise. Very disappointing, very, very disappointing. And what we're offered here is basically a remake. That's just not satisfying. Anyway, this Taniguchi guy becomes the target of this metal fetishist cult who is looking to turn people into essentially Iron Men, Tetsuos. And it turns out that this guy, Taniguchi, has already been transformed by his father, who somehow had magic powers. It's very unclear. It seems like he has magic powers, and he had turned his sons into Tetsuos, for lack of a better word, and now grown up, this cult just picked the wrong guy, and it turns out that the metal fetishist is his long-lost brother. I guess they haven't really talked to each other in a while or something. It's very strange that, he didn't know what his brother was up to. Anyway, two brothers collide, and they each have Tetsuo powers, and the brother has decided to kidnap the wife after killing the son, the little boy. Well, technically Taniguchi kills his son by accident, but he blames the cult, and now the cult has his wife, and it turns into a revenge movie where he goes after the cult. The movie here almost plays like a RoboCop movie, but without the human drama. I think the human element is really missing in this movie, and we kind of just don't really care. At least I didn't really find myself caring about Taniguchi's revenge journey, because I felt very removed from it. So to me, Tetsuo 2 is kind of a dud. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll be rewatching this anytime soon. This one's going to get 2 stars from me. I appreciate the work, the effort, the energy that goes into making this movie. I think Tomoro Taguchi is great as Tetsuo. He's a very expressive actor. I think Shinya does a good job as a director here, but it's definitely more of a stoic camera. Doesn't have the erratic, shaky quality of the first film and stuff like Tokyo Fist will go on to have. As it is, Shinya's sequel, it's kind of a letdown. It's kind of a letdown for me, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but it's true. Let's talk special features. I mentioned my boy Tom Mess. He provides all the audio commentaries here, and he should. He literally wrote the book on Shinya Tsukamoto's films. Here, he provides commentary for everything, and it's very welcome. And the way he's done it is, he starts at the beginning with Denshu Kozo, and he does it chronologically. So through the box set, he'll be reviewing it in the order of release, and in the order that's the best viewing order, essentially, for the movies. So that's how I'm going to be watching the movies as well. Of course, disc 1, disc 2, all that stuff. But also based on what Tom Mez tells me to watch next. I cannot recommend his commentaries enough. They are essential to understanding the movies, understanding Shinya, and getting a new appreciation of the works here. If your first time watch is like, oh god, these movies kind of suck ass, watch it with the commentary track, and I think you'll watch it with a different light. You'll get a mix of, historical perspective of Shinya at the time, why he chose to make these movies, what he was going through to make these movies, all that kind of stuff, all the behind-the-scenes kind of stuff, and an understanding, a reading of the film, plot-wise, so you'll sort of catch on, like, oh, okay, so that's who that guy was. Okay, oh, so this is what's happening now. I think it's intrinsic to understanding the films of Shinya to listen to those commentary tracks. They are, beyond a doubt, essential. Jasper Sharp here narrates An Assault on the Senses, a visual essay on the films of Shinya Tsukamoto, and this is sort of a big overview of the oeuvre that is going to be presented here in the box set. So it's a good primer, and I think you could probably start there before you watch anything. If you wanted to just start there, get a boom 16-minute look at the films, who this guy was, what they represent to cinema and cinema history, I think it's a good primer for the entire box set. So I would suggest, if you want to do that, start there, give yourself an intro, and then start with Denshu Kozo. Next on here, we get 2 archival interviews with with my boy Shinya. One on TETSUO and another one on TETSUO 2. And it's funny because I think he filmed these by himself in his apartment, because he puts credits at the end and it says camera, interviewer, lighting, whatever, Shinya Tsukamoto. So he basically interviewed himself based on questions from, I believe, Third Window Films, who put out some films of his in the UK, and then fans who sent in questions as well. So you get two pretty jam-packed, I think under 20-minute interviews with Shinya about each individual film, and it provides about as much information as the commentary tracks. I don't think he touches on anything necessarily different, but you can see where his mind was when it comes to the making of the movies. It's always nice to hear from the filmmaker themselves as opposed to just a critic who's a fan. So again, essential watching. And that'll do, Bugaboo. That is disc 1, part 1 of Solid Metal Nightmares. I'll show you the inside, by the way. Here's the disc. It's got a little piece of the artwork from the box and then the reversible sleeve. Now, for me, I'm going to flip it over to TETSUO because I prefer that movie over the second one. You do what you like. You do what you like, my friend. That's the joy and the power behind a reversible sleeve. So, let's put this to bed. Disc 1, farewell. Disc 2, in the works. I hope you'll join me for the second installment. We're going to be talking about Tokyo Fist and Bullet Ballet. I haven't seen neither of those movies, so I'm excited to experience them and report back my findings. My friend, thank you so much for joining me. This has been Solid Metal Nightmares, the films of Shinya Tsukamoto, Part 1, Disc 1. I'll be back. I'll be here. I hope you'll join me again for the next one. Until then, until we meet again, just wanted to say, I love you. As a matter of fact, I love you just the way you are. So, let's chat again real soon. I hope this video has found you well. Until we meet again, please remember that I remain to be continued.